We want to welcome you all tonight. My name is Charlene Margot. I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture, and we are just delighted to have with us tonight Melinda Wenner Moyer, best-selling author and award-winning science journalist. She's going to be talking with you about her new book, Hello, Cruel World, Science-Based Strategies for Raising Terrific Kids in Terrifying Times. And we read a lot of parenting books in the course of producing this program, the Parent Education Series, but this one is really special. We really, really, really want you to read this book. Melinda has taken so many of the things that worry us parents, especially in today's uncertain world, and she's really calmed them down and used the science and her journalistic background to make them not just understandable, but actionable. So things that you as a parent can do to improve your life and the lives of your kids. And nothing is more important. Take it away, Melinda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Charlene. Thank you, Bev, both of you for making this happen. And thank you to Cynthia for interpreting tonight as well. That was an amazing introduction, but I'll tell you just a little more about myself and why I wrote my book. So I am first and foremost a mother of two. I have a 14-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And as Charlene said, I'm a science journalist. So I'm not a clinician. I don't work with kids. I mean, except for my own. But I love writing about parenting. And I just want to explain a little bit about how I got there as a science journalist. So when my kids were little, when my son was a baby, I felt like I had gazillions of questions all the time. And I would go to Google and I would type in my questions and I would get 10 conflicting answers. And I was always so confused, didn't know what to do and didn't know who to trust. And so I thought, as a science journalist, I thought, well, I wonder if science can help me. I wonder if science can answer some of these questions I have about parenting. And I had really no idea how much research there was. And when I started looking, I saw there was so much research on parenting, so much research on child development, on child health. And, science isn't perfect. It's certainly a process. And it shifts, it changes, it evolves. Scientists aren't perfect, but I do find that science is really the best tool we have for whittling away at the truth. And so I love turning to science to answer my parenting questions. I've been doing it for years. And I especially find it helpful when I'm feeling anxious, like when I have questions or when I'm just sort of faced with some sort of existential parenting crisis. And I'm like, how do I deal with this big, scary thing? And this is essentially why I wrote my book, Hello, Cruel World, because I know probably a lot of you are feeling this anxiety too, but I feel so much anxiety on behalf of my kids right now. I several years ago was losing so much sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would, be asking myself questions like, are my kids resilient enough? Am I letting them watch too much YouTube? How do I turn them into critical thinkers? And, there have obviously been tough times all throughout history, and some moments in time have certainly been harder for parents than this one. But there's a lot of rapid change happening when you consider political unrest and violence, disinformation, climate change, gun violence, radicalization. I mean, there's just so many things that are scary for us and that are facing, that our kids are facing and that our kids are going to have to deal with in this world that they're going to inherit. And we know that parental anxiety really is at an all-time high. It's not just me, it's not just you. We know this from surveys. And we know it's not great for us as parents, and it's generally not great for our kids either, because I mean, anxiety is, evolutionarily adaptive. It's good, it's helpful in a lot of contexts, but when you get to a certain point, it's not that constructive because it can, impede our ability to be rational. And I think, I just want to say, because I think sometimes when we talk about anxiety, there's sort of can be like a reaction of like, it's our fault. We just shouldn't be so anxious. Like, why are we all so anxious? And like, why can't we just calm down? And I just want to say that I really feel like there's very good reasons for this anxiety right now. I mean, apart from the like rapid changes that we don't really know how our kids are going to handle, we are being told so many scary things about the mental health among tweens and teens right now. We know from the CDC that suicide attempts among teens have increased a lot. Depression, anxiety, kids aren't sleeping as much. We have social media, which, what is this doing to our kids, right? There's so much fear mongering as well. I spend a lot of time on Instagram looking at parenting influencers and what they are saying. And there's just a lot of alarmist messaging around parenting and a lot of sort of perfectionistic direction. Like you have to do this exactly right. You have to say something with the right words, the right tone of voice, or, you're going to mess up your kid for life. And this fear mongering really has an effect on parents. We know this from the research, and I think it's real, but it's also good to keep in mind that a lot of the information we get about parenting is for somebody else's political or financial gain. Like people are making money off of our fear because they're selling, a course that they want you to take in gentle parenting, so that you'll actually be a good parent. And the other thing too that I just want to say is there's the expectations for parents these days are so high. Intensive parenting is real, and the research is finding that intensive parenting is like the expectation that parents will be putting more and more resources of all kinds into raising their children, into their child's development. And it is very intense. It is definitely not a misnomer. It is very intensive parenting. And it is now being shown to become much more pervasive, like in all social classes. And these expectations, which honestly primarily are felt mostly from moms, I mean, parents, dads too, but a lot of this pressure is on moms. It makes us feel like we're not doing enough for our kids, no matter how much we're doing. So all of these feelings of anxiety and angst and stress, these are legitimate given all the inputs we are getting. So I don't want you to feel bad if you're feeling this. Like there are good reasons that we're feeling this way. But as I said, it's not always helpful. So back to why I wrote my book, I really wanted to understand if there was something that I could do as a science journalist to both ease my own anxiety. Yes, there's definitely a selfish reason I wrote the book, but also to help all parents everywhere who are feeling this angst and anxiety. I wanted to see, is there information from the science that can give us a sense of hope and control, and that can really and truly help our kids? So what I wanted to look at was, what are the key skills that kids really need in this world that they're going to inherit? And what are the skills that kids might be especially struggling with these days? And what can parents and other caregivers do to help foster these skills? So my book is vast in the sense that it covers 10 skills and characteristics, and I'm not going to talk about each one of these here. But here's what really amazed me. When I started reporting the book, I knew I wanted each chapter to cover a different skill. And I was really scared that what was going to happen is that I was going to research self-compassion, and I was going to find that the researchers who study self-compassion and how it develops, that what they were going to tell me was going to conflict with what the researchers who were studying resilience were going to tell me, that I was going to get all this conflicting information and not know what to tell parents. And I was really, really scared of this actually, because I mean, in science, things sometimes conflict and you have to figure out like, what do you do with this, right? What's more important? But when I actually started doing the reporting, what I found was the exact opposite. And what I found was that there were themes that kept coming up again and again when I was talking to researchers who studied very different things, who weren't necessarily, even talking to each other, but they would tell me the same things that were helpful for kids for developing that particular skill. And so what this meant was that there were simple strategies that worked to build multiple skills for kids. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to tonight discuss the three biggest take homes, the three biggest themes that I found over and over again in the research that I feel like are potentially the most helpful take homes out of everything in my book. Now, there's much, much more in my book and so much more nuance and so many more specifics, but these are like the three overarching themes that I found. Um, and, I also just want to say that there's a lot of room for interpretation here. There's, no one size fits all approach to parenting. Every family is different. Every parent's different. Every child is different. The research isn't perfect. It hasn't been super inclusive. It's definitely focused more on moms than dads. So everything I'm going to say, I just want to say, do take with a grain of salt. And if you hear me say something and you're like, I don't think that would work for my kid or my family, then that's fine. Just let it go. Not everything is going to work for everybody, but in the research, it does suggest that these things can be helpful for a lot of kids and a lot of parents. So, the first theme that I'm going to talk about. And these are all pretty simple, but I will dig into the science and dig into the rationale. Listen more than you lecture. That's the first one. Listen more than you lecture. So I don't know about you, but when my kids come to me with a problem or a question, or they've done something, they've broken a rule, they've messed up in some way, I feel like it's my job to jump immediately into like authority mode, right? I need to put on my mom hat and start momming. And that means in my brain, like, oh, I need to fix this problem. I need to educate my kids because they don't understand this issue that they're talking about. Or I need to, problem solve on behalf of my kids. Or I need to, tell them what they did wrong and why it's wrong. And that is my instinct. And I know a lot of parents have a similar instinct of like, I need to just like, I need to take control and I need to fix this. But based on the research that I have read, I've been working really hard to resist this impulse over the past year or so since I wrote the book, because as it turns out, it can be much more helpful for kids when we take a breath and we listen to them and we are curious rather than jumping in quickly to educate, to fix, to reprimand. And this listening can be helpful in so many contexts, and it can be helpful for so many reasons. So it can be helpful like when our kids are trying to tell us about their day, when they're sharing their feelings, when they're acting upset, when they are pushing back on boundaries or rules that we've set. So I'm going to dig into the specifics here a little bit more as I talk about some of the reasons for this. So there are a lot of reasons why listening to our kids is really, really helpful. Number one, kids learn from our modeling, right? And when people think about relationships and communication and like what's the most important thing for relationships, what's the most important thing for communication, a lot of people think, oh, it's talking well, right? It's being eloquent, it's expressing yourself well. But actually researchers who study communication say no, it's actually good listening skills. Good listening skills are paramount for good communication and healthy relationships. And so when we listen well to our kids, and I'm going to talk about what listening well means in a second, we are showing them how to listen to others, right? And so listening generally involves giving a speaker their undivided attention. You're giving a speaker your undivided attention, like making eye contact and that kind of thing. Communicating that you understand what the speaker is saying. And so this is like asking clarifying questions. It's really interesting because when I talked to researchers about this, they said, when you're a good listener, you're not asking questions to satisfy your own curiosity, actually. You're asking questions to ensure that you understand what the other person is trying to say. And I thought that was really interesting. And then the third really key part of good listening is positive intention. That's what it's referred to, which basically means that the listener conveys to the speaker that the speaker is free to express whatever views they have without having to worry about negative consequences. So it's not the same thing as agreeing with them. You can absolutely be a good listener and be, listening to somebody who you vehemently disagree with, but it's about conveying to the speaker that, I'm letting you voice your views and you're not going to have negative consequences for doing so. So this is the first thing. Listening as a parent models good listening for our kids, and they will learn from us through this. A second really big thing that listening does is it makes your child feel heard and respected, which builds their confidence and their competence. So when it's a form of showing respect to our kids, right? It's saying you have a voice, you have an opinion, you have feelings that are important enough that I'm going to shut my mouth and listen to you, and we're going to spend time on you, and you have the microphone. It also gives kids a kind of a sense of autonomy. So, we're sort of saying we're giving them the independence to speak, to say what's on their mind. And we know when kids' needs for autonomy are met, they're more likely to listen to us. They're more interested in respecting us. So one example where this comes in handy is like if you're setting a rule relating to screen time, you could come in and just say, listen, this is the new rule, 15 minutes of TikTok a day, that's it. I don't want to hear anything you have to say about this. This is not up for discussion, the end, and you could walk away, right? This is And this is very common, right? It's like you're in charge. You don't want your kids to talk back to you. I get it. But it's also an interaction that gives the kids no autonomy. They are being controlled. They feel very controlled. Like, wow, I'm not even allowed to talk about this. I can't say how I feel about this. And when we interact with kids in that way, they still want and need that sense of autonomy. So they might take it in a different way. They might take it by rebelling. They might take it by breaking the rule. They might take it, in a way that is not very pleasant. So if instead we go to our kids and we say, hey, I've been reading a lot about TikTok recently, and I have a lot of concerns, and I want to set a new rule, but I want to talk to you about it. And I also, I'm also curious, like, what is it that you get out of TikTok? And like engage with them, ask them for their opinion, their thoughts, and be willing to give and take a little bit. That listening, that respecting is very, very helpful for just ensuring that our kids actually listen to us and will, um, follow what we have suggested or what rule we have set. Um, Okay, here's another reason why listening to our kids is helpful. And this one totally blew my mind when I read this research. So, when we listen to our kids, we increase the chance that they will be more open minded and curious and humble. So, this is a really big part. I would say it's not a huge part of my book in terms of how many pages I dedicate to it, because there's not as much research as I would like, but this was so important to me in writing my book. I wanted to understand, how do we raise kids who will be open-minded, who will be curious, who will not maybe become as polarized as we're seeing the world today. How do we raise kids who won't immediately jump to extreme views? Like, this was something that felt very important to me to understand. And I was really not expecting that listening to our children might be the best way to do this. So there's really fascinating research from a psychologist in Israel, Guy Itzikov. And he actually studies high quality listening. And when I was talking about how to be a good listener, that's also his research. He studies, the impacts of feeling heard and how that affects people. And in one of his studies, he had college students have a conversation with someone with an opposing political opinion. And some of those conversation partners listened well, doing the things I was talking about before. And some of them just didn't listen well. They acted distracted. They didn't ask follow-up questions. They seemed hostile. And they found that the college students who were paired with the good listeners said that the conversation helped them think more deeply about the topic. And that when they were sort of tested on the extremity of their views at the end of the study, they had less extreme views by the end of it. In another study, he found that the feeling of being listened to made people more humble and more willing to consider their weaknesses. So it's really interesting. And when I asked him, like, why does this happen? Because, it's not intuitive. Why would being heard make somebody more open-minded, more humble? He said it's about psychological safety, essentially. So here's a flip example. If you are in danger, your thinking goes extremely myopic. You are like, the only thing that matters is that I keep my children safe, and, I get them out of this house that's on fire, whatever it is. And it's like your peripheral vision goes, like, you are just like focused on saving your family. And that is an evolutionarily adaptive thing, right? Because we don't want to be distracted in that situation. So that's all we do. When we feel safe, on the other hand, our brain relaxes and kind of opens up, and we actually naturally become more willing to consider other perspectives, other things around us, etc. So it is really this feeling of being heard, respected, that makes us be more open-minded and considerate. I think that is just a beautiful thing, and it's so simple. But that's not all. That's not the only. Like, I can't believe how many things listening to our kids can do. There's more. So another really big thing, we build trust with our kids in our relationship. And when we listen to them, we make them more interested in opening up to us again in the future. When kids, this is true for anybody, right? If you feel like you've been heard and respected by somebody that you're having a conversation with, then you're going to feel more comfortable opening up to them again in the future. So I think this is really important, though, for parents to keep in mind, because sometimes when our kids confide in us, and especially if they confide in us about something that we don't really like the sound of, like something that happened at school or something they did, often our instinct is to not listen, but to jump in, to become like to put on the mom hat and be like, oh no, 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 no. Like what did you what? No, you did not do that, right? And here's an example of this from my own life. I picked up my son from a sleepover about a year ago. And, normally I ask, how was the sleepover? And I get like a one-word response, like, fine. What did you do? Nothing. And for whatever reason, it was probably a great lack of sleep. This particular day, he just started telling me about what he did at the sleepover. And it was like, and then we watched a movie, and then we had pizza, and then we did this. And all of a sudden he gets to, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, we snuck out of the house and went to the gas station to get candy. And of course, in that moment, what I wanted to do was to like record scratch and be like, you did what now? Like, no, 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 that is not okay, right? I wanted to jump down his throat. I wanted to like reprimand him and tell him this cannot happen again. But I'd had a conversation recently with Judith Smetana, who is at the University of Rochester, I believe. She's an adolescent parent relationship expert. She studies this. And she had told me in these situations, when our kids confide in us, the best thing we can do in that moment is to like basically bite our tongue, to take a breath, bite our tongue, not say anything overly negative, and just get, and just be curious and say, oh, I can't remember what I said, something like, that's interesting. Why did you decide to do that? And what happened? And sort of not jump down their throat so that next time he wants to tell me something, he won't remember this and think, oh, I shouldn't tell my mom anything. I should just keep it to myself. Now, what Dr. Smetana did say is that it is absolutely okay and very important in these situations when we're talking about kid safety to have a conversation later, to bring it back up when you're calm, when it's not this particular moment where they're confiding in you, and say, hey, I want to just revisit something, right? So it's totally okay to have that conversation, but she's saying like, don't do it right then. Do it later when you're calm. Come into it, calmly, and not in a sort of I'm going to yell at you sort of mindset. So yeah, when we listen to our kids, we're increasing the chance that they will come to us again, that they will trust us, and we're building this intimacy with them that can be so, so helpful. And I also want to add that a lot of times, when our kids come to us with problems, what researchers said to me is that they don't always want us to fix them. They often really just want to vent. They want us to listen. And sometimes with my kids, once they have gotten the thing off their chest, all I really have to say, I can mirror back to them what I'm hearing. I can validate and say, gosh, that sounds really hard. But that's sometimes all they want. And they don't want me to fix it. They don't want me to tell them what they should do next time. I mean, and sometimes I've just asked, and that's another great way to do it. Say, would you like to just have me listen, or do you want me to try to help? And do you want me to brainstorm with you what you could do? A lot of times kids and psychologists have said this to me too. A lot of times they really just want to get it off their chest, and then they feel better. And there's actually research on this, that when you put into words how you're feeling, it instantly changes how you feel. Like it makes you feel better. So sometimes they just don't even want that. And I think that's something that's really hard to keep in mind. So to summarize, listening to our kids is just it's amazing. It does so many good things. It models good listening, which is going to help them with their relationship skills, their communication. It builds curiosity and open-mindedness in our kids, humility, confidence. It gives them a sense of autonomy. It makes them more willing to work with us and listen to us, and it builds trust. So these are all amazing things, right? So I'm now like on team listen very much. Okay, so that was the first one, listen more than you lecture. Number two, prepare more than you protect. Prepare more than you protect. So I mentioned already a little bit about the data on teen and tween mental health, and it's scary. And I don't know about you, but when I hear about suicidality, depression, anxiety in kids, it makes me want to protect my kids from bad feelings and from difficult experiences. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, that's going to protect them from mental health problems, right? Like if they have an easy life and don't experience hard things, then that's probably better for them, right? I mean, that's where my brain goes. That makes sense to me. We're also, understandably very, very afraid of trauma. We don't want our kids to suffer trauma. But And a lot of what I'm going to say next comes from the work of Lisa D'Amour, who I know has been a guest in the Parent Venture before. Um, and she's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful. I love her books. She makes several points. One is that trauma is not defined by the experience a person has. It's really rooted in a person's reaction to an experience they have and whether or not they have the coping skills to handle it. So two people can undergo the same experience, have the same bad experience, and one can develop a trauma response and one may not. The other thing she says is that mental health is not about feeling good all the time. Mental health is about having feelings that are appropriate for the situation and having the coping skills to deal with them. So coping skills are really, really, really important, it seems, for strengthening mental health, for preventing trauma. And what builds coping skills? Practice. So kids have to experience difficult feelings and difficult experiences, failure, frustration, disappointment, in order to be in a situation where they have the opportunity to practice their coping skills. And so when we protect our kids from difficult experiences, we are kind of robbing them from an opportunity to shore up their coping skills. And this can show up in a lot of different ways, this sort of protection of kids' feelings. And one way that I feel like is a little insidious and it's hard to see, but I see it all the time, is when parents are curating their kids' environments so that they don't experience hard feelings. So, one situation, one context in which I see this is overnight camp. So, overnight camp is not supposed to be just like home. It is supposed to be different. It is supposed to be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes for kids, right? You're in a cabin with maybe not a comfortable mattress. You're nervous. You might miss your parents a little. These are all things that are actually, features, not bugs when it comes to camp. These are good things. And one of the reasons is because it gives kids these opportunities to develop coping skills, to problem solve, to work on their social skills, and also to get through maybe a difficult couple of days and get on the other side and say, hey, I'm okay now. I did okay. Like I got through that. And it gives this sense of confidence and self-esteem as well. Um, so what I see sometimes at camp is, families coming in with like their entire bedroom with them, all the stuffed animals, fairy lights, all that they put up all around the beds. They send a care package every single day. So this is an example of like the parent does not want the child to feel discomfort, which is totally understandable. And by the way, I've sent my kids too many care packages at camp, so I'm one of these parents too. Um, and it's also about alleviating our own discomfort at worrying that our kids are feeling discomfort, right? So there's a lot of ways in which we can protect our kids from hard feelings that may not be, just traditional like snowplow parenting, which is like when you don't, you kind of clear a path for your kids and you don't let them experience hard things. It can come about in weird ways, like just, bringing fairy lights to camp, maybe when you don't necessarily have to. It doesn't have to be just like home. Um, so another way that we do this, that we might overprotect, there's a lot of ways that, unfortunately, that parents overprotect these days. And again, I want to say that this is because we are told that we should. We are sent all sorts of fear-mongering messages about risk and about how scary the world is that is making us do this. So this is not our fault. But another thing is we might jump in and sort of help them with their homework, their school projects. And there's a really there was a study that I learned about when I wrote my first book, and it sticks with me, which is that kids were surveyed about how they feel when their parents help them with their homework. And the older the kids were, the more they said this, but a lot of kids said, when my parents step in to do my homework for me, it makes me feel like my parents think I'm incompetent. It makes me feel like they think I'm inept and I can't do it. And so it's like directly tied to self-esteem and this sense of competence, right? Um, and it's also, when we jump in and fix something, we're kind of robbing them of the opportunity to figure out how to deal with it themselves. And so one example that I will share has to do is another one with my son. I'm sorry, he's probably going to kill me. I hope he's not. No, actually, a lot of these examples I've shared in my Substack, and I always do ask for my kids' consent. as much consent as they can provide at their ages, but I do ask them if it's okay. Um, so my son was in 6th grade and he had this amazing social studies project. My daughter's actually in 6th grade now and she's just starting it, and I'm excited. But they choose a country to be, but it's like a pretend country. And then they have to create like everything related to the civics of this country. They have to create a government. They have to come up with trade laws. They have to decide what their currency is. They have to talk about their language. They have to talk about the architecture and figure it out and like come up with this whole like uh, book about this country that they've invented. It's super cool. And one of the projects was that they had to design a building that would appear in their country, that would, you know, be in their country. And my son decided that he was going to have his building be a 200-story skyscraper or something like that. And he was building this painstakingly on Minecraft, I believe. And you can imagine 200 stories, it takes a long time. So his project was taking a lot longer than, you know, a lot of his peers' projects were. And the night it was due, he came in to my room sobbing. And it was like 10 p.m. and it was due at midnight. And he was like, Mom, I can't finish this. It's not happening. And he was like, can you help? Like, can you call my teacher? Can you email my teacher and tell them I can't turn it in, you know? And in that moment, I felt so much empathy for my son because, you know, he's a 6th grade boy. His executive functioning skills are not like, they're not really solid yet. So of course, with a big project like this, you know, there's going to be planning deficits. And also he had taken on like a really difficult project that was taking much longer than it really should have. So I felt a lot of empathy for him and I wanted to jump in. I wanted to be like, it's okay, go to bed. I will fix this and don't worry, you know, you need your sleep. But I was like, wait a minute, let me think about this. And this is something that I try to do in moments when I have no idea what to do. I think, what could I do in this moment that could help build skills in my kids? Or what can I do in this moment that will help my child become the adult I want them to be? Right? This is a grounding question that I ask myself a lot. And I thought, okay, jumping in and fixing this for my kid is what I want to do so they don't feel frustrated and scared and sad. But I don't think that's the best thing for me to be doing here. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna support him. I'm not gonna say, sorry, this is your problem. Good luck. You know, that's also not the answer. Somewhere in between, I was like, I'm going to try to scaffold and work with him, but have him take the lead. And interestingly enough, listening is a great way in. So I said, okay, this, first of all, I did validate. I was like, this sounds really hard. You know, I'm sorry that you're so frustrated. And this, I know you've put so much time into this project and this must be really scary and hard. And I said, what do you think your options are here? And I basically turned it back to him and I was like, I'm going to help you, but what do you think you could do right now? And he was at first, he's like, I don't know. I was like, well, let's think through it. Like, what are your options, you know? And he started thinking through and he's like, well, I could turn it in right now, not done, but I'd meet my deadline. I was like, all right. And he's like, I don't think I want to do that because then, you know, I want to finish this. And I was like, okay. And then he went through all the options and eventually we got to this. He was like, I think I need to email my teacher and tell him what's happening and ask for an extension and hope that he doesn't dock my grade too much, but I really want to finish this. And so he got there and I mean, I was there, but I didn't really do a whole lot. Like it was just being there for him. And then he got there and in the end, like it worked out great. And his teacher was very understanding and he finished the project and he felt really good about it. And so that's again, another situation where we're preparing, like it's about preparing rather than protecting. Um, the other thing that I want to talk about here is just the value of giving kids age appropriate independence. Sorry, I was just looking at my clock because I'm like, oh, the time is going faster than I thought it was. Okay, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. There was a survey recently of parents where parents were asked, you know, how much do you allow your kids to do on their own? And the parents overwhelmingly said, I make it a point to have my kid do things on their own, like, you know, independently. But when they actually drilled down in the survey and they asked specific questions, they found parents were not letting their kids do a whole lot. So half of parents of kids age 9 to 11 said they wouldn't let their kid go to an adjacent aisle in the grocery store to get an item. 67% said they wouldn't let their child walk or bike to a friend's house. And admittedly, in certain neighborhoods, in certain contexts, this actually wouldn't be safe. But this survey had asked, do you live in what you consider a safe neighborhood? And most of the parents had said yes. Um, Younger ages, 76% of parents of ages 5 to 8 year olds wouldn't let their child speak to an unfamiliar adult in a business situation, like ordering at a restaurant. 70% didn't let their kids decide how to spend their allowance money. So there's definitely a mismatch here where parents are thinking that they're giving their kids some independence and they're really not. And again, I think this is because we are being told that we should protect and that this is what we need to do to keep our kids safe and mentally healthy. But what we know is that actually giving kids opportunities for independence when it feels safe to do so helps them gain confidence, gain problem solving skills, social skills, coping skills again. So that's another really important thing that we can do. And if you can't find, or if you're in a community where you'd be the only parent allowing your kid to walk to school, for instance, and you feel like you'd be judged, that's really a tough position to be in. But I would say try to find your posse, like try to find at least one other family that shares your values and see if you can, start hanging out with them and have your child walk to school with them. Because you might not be the only one. It may just be that these other families are also feeling like they can't do it or they shouldn't do it. But if you kind of find your posse, then you can have the courage to take those steps. Okay, the last theme, and I'm going to go fairly quickly through this one because I want to save room for questions. Um, Comfort more than you chide. So when my kid is upset, um, sometimes I want to jump in and fix the problem, but as we've already talked about, and I try not to. The other thing that I will sometimes feel like I want to do is sort of downplay their feelings, and because I want them to go away. I don't like seeing my kids upset. I do not like it at all. Um, but my discomfort with it will sometimes cause me to like dismiss my kids' feelings. So I'll say like, "You're fine. You're fine. You're fine." Or it's not that bad. You don't need to cry this much. Or, why are you so upset? This isn't a big deal. Like these kinds of sort of well-meaning, because we want our kids to feel better, but somewhat dismissive reactions to our kids' feelings. But what we know from the research is that when we have this kind of reaction, we can actually counterproductively make our kids even more upset. Because again, it comes down to kids want to be heard and understood. And if they're upset, they want us to get that. They want us to be like, "Oh, yeah, you're really upset." Because then they're like, "Yes, mom sees me. She sees that I'm really upset and I want her to understand how upset I am." So when we're being dismissive or when we tell our kids not to feel the way they're feeling, it can make them escalate, right? So that they're like, "Well, I need to be even more upset to show mom how upset I am." And it's also, kind of, it undermines their emotional experience a little bit, which can induce some shame because kids might think, "Well, I guess I shouldn't feel this way. And gosh, what's wrong with me?" Right. Um, so validating, comforting, while also setting, necessary boundaries with behavior is really, really useful. And what I mean by that is like you can both validate a feeling and set a boundary. So you could say, I see that you are so frustrated right now, and I totally understand, and this must be really hard, but you can't throw eggs at your sister or whatever. Sorry, my son was talking about throwing eggs. Anyway, that's a conversation that I do not need to bring into this. Um, but it was in my brain. Um, and I also will just quickly say though that this is a little different from the wisdom that I've heard of like when your kid gets, falls on the playground to not react first. They say like, don't be like, "Oh, are you okay? Oh my gosh, you just fell." They say like, "Okay, wait and see what your child does first, because maybe they won't be upset and you don't need to be upset." You can still do that. This is about like, if your child is actually upset, then ignoring it, dismissing it is not always the most helpful thing. One other thing that is related to comforting that I just want to throw out there is that it can be really helpful to share your own feelings, your own experiences, your own mistakes with your kids. And this is something that I think, especially in the gentle parenting discourse, gets a little bit lost because I feel like there's this expectation that parents should always be calm, should always be stoic, should not ever communicate to their kids that they ever have problems or that they're ever tired or that they're ever frustrated, right? We should just always be this like pillar of calmness. And this is really not what the research says is helpful. Certainly, we do not want our kids to feel like they're responsible for our well-being. And we shouldn't be expecting them to fix our problems for us. But it can be so helpful to say to kids, I had actually a tough day today. I made a mistake in a meeting and I was really embarrassed and I had to take some deep breaths and then I felt sad for a little while. Like telling your kids what you experience, the fact that you mess up, like it can be so, so helpful because it normalizes these experiences and these feelings, which everybody has, including adults. It makes kids realize that like nobody's perfect. Adults make mistakes. We learn from them, and that is okay and that is good. So I am all for like sharing our fallibility and vulnerability with our kids in an age appropriate, emotionally appropriate way. I really think that like mistakes as parents in general, mistakes are very, very helpful. And they can be helpful when you make a mistake in your parenting too, because that's an opportunity for repair. It's an opportunity to show, to model accountability, taking responsibility for your mistakes. So I really believe that, our vulnerability, our honesty, and our humility are really, really helpful for our kids to see. So, yes, that is it. Just to summarize the three key points, and then I'll take questions. Listen more than you lecture, prepare more than you protect, comfort more than you chide. So, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, well, thank you, Melinda. There's so many things that I would like to talk to you about, but we have questions. So for any of you who are not with us in the beginning, this is Melinda's new book, Hello, Cruel World, Science-Based Strategies for Raising Terrific Kids in Terrifying Times. Goodness knows we have some uncertain times we're going through right now. But I've been doing this working with families and children for more than 3 decades. This is one of the best books that we've read. And I mean it, that Melinda covers so many topics. Like she's talking tonight about the 3 really kind of strategies that work across the board. But the book tackles everything from friendships to social media to, financial literacy, all kinds of things that you want to read about. So again, Melinda, before we get going, I wanted to dive in again to what you were talking about with mistakes and children, because so often we hear parents say, oh, but doesn't it weaken my relationship if I apologize? And I have always apologized to my children. So I would like your take on that, because I think it's
Oh,
really important.
I completely agree that it is very important. Yeah, no, apologizing to our kids does so many good things. I mean, it is teaching our kids to apologize, right? It's showing them like this is how you repair and this is how you take responsibility for what you've done and this is how you show you care about people. So it's modeling all of these things that I would hope that we would want to see our kids doing. And yes, it's normalizing mistakes, the fact that everybody messes up, everybody, like if you yell at your child, which yes, of course, I have yelled at my children before. Nobody wants to. It happens, right? But afterwards, it's so powerful to apologize to your child and say, and also to maybe even talk about like, what could I have done differently so that I didn't get that upset and scream at you? And that's another thing I love is like bringing my kids into my own problem solving, like asking them for advice. And like I asked my daughter recently, I said, I get so nervous when I give talks. Like, what do you think I could do to calm myself down? So that's like another good thing. Anyway, I'm sort of off topic, but yes, I think I don't agree that apologizing somehow like weakens our relationship. I think it strengthens it.
Well, it reminds me of that hilarious video with the grandmother and the daughter and the kid, right? Where they're talking about gentle parenting and the daughter keeps saying, we don't use those words. We say, what are you planning? And the grandmother's like, I don't know what I'm planning. Do you know what you're planning next? So the idea is that there really is this give and take, right, between parents and their children. And you, as you say, being vulnerable as a parent and honest, I think gets you a lot farther than trying to be the one who knows everything.
Yes, and that is also true in a broader sense where when I talked about preventing polarization and we know that modeling a comfort with uncertainty is very, very helpful. So saying to kids like, oh, I don't know the answer to that question, or I don't have a strong opinion about this yet because I haven't done enough research, like modeling that it's okay to not have a strong opinion or strong belief or to know everything, that is so important for, fostering open-mindedness and curiosity and like encouraging kids to take time before they develop an opinion.
Yeah, and like my friends at Health Connected used to say, if you get a question, especially let's just say around sexuality, and you need a minute, you can say to your kid, that's a really good question. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yes, I've done that many times.
right? It's not
Yeah,
a,
you
it's
sometimes you
not,
need to.
it's not a
Yeah,
bad thing to do. We don't
not
have
at
to have all
all.
the answers. So,
Yeah.
Melinda, you organized this book into three different sort of broad-based buckets that are coping, connection, and cultivation. Can you tell us how you came to those three? My guess is you considered several.
Yeah, I did. I did. I mean, I knew from the research on how to preserve kids' mental health that coping skills was going to be a big part of it. Like coping is so important. How, this world is, and the world is a difficult world right now. So coping skills are especially important. So I knew that was going to be in there. Connection. I mean, we know that relationships are so important for so many reasons, for resilience, for happiness. Like there's a lot of statistics on just how important healthy relationships are for our well-being, for our health, for all of that. So I knew that, and I know that many parents are worried about how well or not well kids are connecting with their peers right now, especially with social media and whatnot. So I knew that would be a big part. And then cultivating, I really wanted to talk about like what can we do to cultivate like certain life skills like financial literacy and media literacy, things that are really important for kids to have for themselves, but also can help, foster a better world. So it was like looking to the future and, what can we do to sort of cultivate a better tomorrow?
So speaking of that, Melinda, can we talk for a minute about a few of the things that you do touch on? One of the things you talk a lot about throughout the book is the importance of autonomy and agency. Some of our favorite people are Dr. Bill Stixert and Ned Johnson, who wrote The Self-Driven Child. I know you know them. Can you just talk for a minute about why autonomy is such a building block for kids' resilience, that they need that for their mental health? I mean, I remember my daughter in the fifth grade coming halfway down the stairs and saying to me, "Don't you ever talk to me again about my homework." And I was like, okay. And you know what? It worked because for her, that was something she could control and she did it. That's not true for every parent, but I was like, okay, that's how you want it. We'll go there.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really, we know from research from self-determination theory that a sense of autonomy is like crucial for well-being for everybody. You have to feel like you have some agency and some control over your life. Or, things do not go well. Things are not good if you do not have that. All sorts of things go wrong. So it's just a fundamental human need, is what I think researchers have come to realize. But it's something that's really hard to find the right balance with sometimes in parenting, because we do want to be like in charge. We are, right? We're not our kids' best friends. We are their parents, and they don't always know what's best for them. We have to take charge. But it's like it's a real balance, a delicate balance that we kind of need to strive between, take being in control, and also making sure that we are giving our kids the opportunity to feel autonomous, to make certain decisions. And it could even it doesn't have to be in the same domain. Like you could say, I have this rule in this one area and I really can't budge, but give them autonomy in another area, like, so that it's just about overall feeling like you have a sense of control. And if you take away too much control, then kids really start to rebel, they stop listening to you, then you see a lot of behavioral issues. So it's tough, though, tough to find the
Yeah.
balance.
And it's never too early to start, right?
Right. Yes. No, even 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds need to
Right.
feel like they have some agency, or yeah, they get frustrated. Yeah.
Right. So, Melinda, another one of the themes that you talk about throughout the book is values and family values and why those practices make a difference. Can you talk for a minute about why establishing values and making sure that you talk about it as a family matters for kids' development?
Yeah. Um, So, I mean, I really think of our values as like our guiding posts throughout our lives, right? What really matters to us more than anything, and how do we, and we should be using our values to inform all of our decisions, right? It's just like especially when you're feeling lost and you're not sure how to deal with something, like you can turn to your values and you can say, okay, what do I really care about? I care about this, I care about that. So that's going to help me make this decision. And I just think it's a very clarifying force in our lives. And that's true. That can be true for our kids too. And when they have a strong sense of values, family values, if you um, whatever they are. Maybe you really value honesty. Maybe, you really value communication. When our kids know what our values are, it helps them. It's hard to be a kid. It's hard to know where to turn and what to do in certain situations. And if they have a sense of what's important, and that can really be clarifying. The other, I would also say that, like, there's so many ways in which we can instill value, communicate our values to our kids. Yes, you can sit down and be like, let's talk about our family values, and it's beautiful. People will write up, like, here's the five big values in our family that we adhere to. I love that. But you can also do it, and we are doing it in the everyday conversations we have about everything. And so I'm a really big fan of talking about the why behind everything as a parent. Like, if you want to set a rule, why do I want to set this rule? Because a lot of times the why will contain information about our values, right?
Mhm.
And so giving that context and having, communicating really openly with our kids can help them understand our values, help to sort of solidify values over time.
And I think also that the kids get it. Like, I was a single parent during my kids' sort of middle elementary school, middle school years. And I felt like, although we talked a lot and we were very close, I didn't know that I was communicating what I was until, as young adults, they came back and said, oh no, we knew exactly what the family values were. So you don't have to put it up on a bulletin board. You can simply have these conversations, right, with your kids.
Yes, yes, absolutely. They will pick up on it just through the conversations we have.
All right. And listen, I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I would be remiss if we did not tackle, at least quickly, digital technology and all the blame and shame that goes with that. Melinda, in her book here, tackles it in a way that is just so sensible. So if you would comment on the fear mongering and how some folks like Jonathan Haidt, whose book has been such a raging bestseller, are not doing the science the justice it deserves.
Yeah, the science is very, very complicated on digital technology. I spend a lot of time poring over it. And as a science journalist, I think it's really, really important that we communicate science accurately and with nuance so that people can trust science and the scientific process. I have been frustrated. So The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt's book, I agree with a lot of what he talks about in his book. He talks a lot about giving kids, independence, and I am very much on board for that. And I agree with a lot of what he says about digital technology, but I do not believe that he is describing the state of the science accurately. It's framed in a way that I find alarmist, and I find that worrying because we know that the guilt and stress that parents feel over our kids' use of technology affects the parent-child relationship, perhaps more than the use of technology itself. So we know that, like, that fear that we have about our kids using screens, it affects how we engage with them. It affects all sorts of things in ways that are kind of insidious and hard to see. So I am very much for, like, let's come up with strategies that are going to maximize the benefits of technology and minimize the harm, because it definitely is harm, but I feel like it is sometimes communicated in a way that is very, very scary. That is like, this is going to ruin your kid. I mean, the show Adolescence, which I loved as a show, but my goodness, like, it portrayed social media and technology as, like, you will not know that your child is struggling until they murder someone,
Until they
which
murdered someone, exactly.
is not what researchers told me. They say, look, if your kids are struggling because of the social media use, you will see signs if you were paying attention. You will know. It is not something that just comes out of nowhere. So there's a lot of ways in which we are being fed this really, really scary narrative over social media. And I definitely think it is concerning, but we can approach it in a way that is, more balanced, and that is more helpful.
Yeah, so that could include, for example, as you say, talking to your kids about what is it about Instagram that you like? Can you show me something? Can you show me a video that you watched today from TikTok, right? I think that's going to go a lot farther than saying, here are the rules, I make the rules, right? Because we saw during COVID, parents did a lot of backsliding in terms of rule setting.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest take home that I got in terms of, there's not a one size fits all, like, screen time framework that I could say every kid should follow, right? Because it really depends on the family, it depends on the kids, their ages, all sorts of things, what they're doing online. But what I can say is that if you want to set a rule or a boundary around the use of technology, the best way to do that is in the context of open two-way communication with your kids, listening to your kids, as I talked about earlier, saying, okay, I want to talk about TikTok, or I want to talk about how much you're on your screen, but I also want to hear what you have to say. And to show that, you're willing to maybe negotiate a little, or, work with them a little. Like, we know that kids are much more likely to follow our technology rules if we approach them in this much more respectful, open way than if we are just, here's the rules. I don't want to hear what you have to say. And if you break them, you're grounded. Right.
Absolutely. And parents, that means if you're going to set rules about the phone, you might have to put your phone down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hard as that is, right?
Yes. Right.
I
Yes,
see the
absolutely.
babies in strollers and I think, how are they competing with mom on the cell phone pushing the stroller,
Yeah, I know. I know.
right? Well, Melinda, this has been an amazing hour together. Everybody, I really, really, Bev and I love this book, highly recommend it. So I just want to give you 30 seconds to give us any final thoughts, Melinda. You've given us so much to think about tonight.
Oh, goodness. Final thoughts. Yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate that there's so much pressure being put on parents, moms in particular, to get everything right. There's so much mom guilt. There's so much mom shame. Like, I'm not doing this right. I'm not doing enough. I haven't signed them enough for enough extra, whatever it is. Um, and the research really doesn't support that we need to be perfect parents. Like, we actually do our kids um, a service by being imperfect. The mistakes we make, the uncertainty we have, all of these things are actually very, very valuable for kids to see. And so I think, like, we should let go of that need that we feel to do everything right, because actually that's not possible. Nobody can. And B, it's not necessarily what's best for our kids or for us.
I think that is a perfect note to end on, parents. You really, Melinda, just hit it on the head that this is what we need to do. A little bit gentle, a little bit of self-compassion for ourselves as parents, especially moms, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you. Take care. Congratulations on your new book. We love it. Everybody, we hope to see you again soon. But special thank you tonight to author and science journalist Melinda Wenner Moyer. Thank you, Melinda. See
Thank
y'all
you
the
so
other night.
much.
They loved it too. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Good night.